What's up, guys? So I wanted to talk a little bit about crypto gaming, the NFT market, and my thoughts on these various different chains. Been deep in the weeds again, and to be honest with you, like when I look at the NFT market, it's always been somewhat perplexing. And to be honest with you, in a lot of ways, it makes me puke and sick because a lot of it, I think it's, the shuffling back and forth, or people with, obviously multiple different wallet addresses and kind of creating fake volume, passing it back and forth between friends, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of like fictitious stuff that goes on in the NFT market, and then you're like, why would somebody be buying this for this amount? And how much of it is still this kind of speculation and chasing after this premise that somebody else is going to buy your bag for this much more. But I have been looking at a lot of the floor prices, neotokyo citizens, the mutant apes, a few different collections, and just kind of like looking at the floor levels. A lot of this stuff didn't fall out. It fell out, and some of the stuff just completely kind of got washed away. But some of the like more popular collections, it didn't kind of burn off as much as I thought to this point. Now we could still have another 6 months, a year of burn off and pain with those, and it'll be interesting to see if anybody does anything with these, because there's attributes assigned to these neotokyo citizens, and there's a lot of things you could do with that. Now, whether they'll ultimately roll anything out to where it'll be some kind of like ecosystem where these things can exist in a metaverse is really hard saying. So one of the issues with that, and this is one thing I've just dove into more and more here lately, it's going to be somewhat hard to port these. If it was done on Ethereum, if the collection was created on Ethereum, then it's like you're going to have to bridge it over to another chain that actually has the capability of actually having some sort of metaverse or some kind of in-game kind of NFT scenario, and wormhole that over to Solana or Avalanche, or like I've mentioned before, Tezos. It's going to have to go over to another chain, and it's actually kind of aggravating to me to see still all this kind of activity over on Ethereum, and the fees are higher than they were back in, let's say, like 2020. So the network's still somewhat bogged down, or the fees are still kind of like high-ish in comparison to that. And you just think that like over time, obviously when the fees got crazy, people just didn't dip out and just completely kind of abandon that for all practical purposes. But they didn't, and a lot of this activity is still taking place on Ethereum, oddly enough. And then it's like, well, there's no future in that. They're not going to be able to build, a metaverse. They're not going to be able to actually have any kind of like functioning sort of, crypto gaming platform on Ethereum, which is aggravating. And then, like, I've talked about this before, and just to kind of like come full circle and look at it again, I've been in crypto blogging for 7 years, starting out with Steam in July of 2016. Then obviously there was the fork into Hive and stuff like that. And actually one of the best platforms for Web3 kind of crypto gaming, crypto blogging, and just like an overall ecosystem is the Hive blockchain. And it's kind of crazy because there are some games out there, and there was a new game that I just recently saw where it's actually a first-person shooter with in-game NFTs that exist on the Hive blockchain. And then it's like, well, okay, why is this not becoming more successful? Because that's kind of like, that was one of the holy grails where I was like, man, somebody could really kind of put together a good like first person shooter where, okay, let's say if you find like armor, or you find like guns and stuff like that, that would be an in-game NFT that you picked up and you got to that level, and then you own that, and then you could resell it so that maybe someone wouldn't have to go through all the levels to find it, this kind of thing. And I just think that like when there's these levels extraction, like abstraction, that people have to go through to sort of get to the game, or kind of like learn the ecosystem, and then just the markets down in general, it's very hard to kind of gain that momentum and onboard users. User acquisition is very, very tough, and a lot of these companies, let's say out in Silicon Valley, pay a lot of money to do customer acquisition. Even if you look at like Uber and Lyft or different companies like that, or DoorDash or Instacart and stuff like that, they basically subsidized, the fact that the order was going to be cheaper and stuff like that to to really onboard users and get them to be on the platform, get them addicted to using it. And when you don't have that kind of money backing you, it's very, very, very hard to do the customer acquisition. And you say, well, if the game was so good that it just pulled all these people in, but it comes to the price point, and then it's like, well, you've almost got to create your own token to sort of inherently kind of source funds from it. And then you're going to have to go through all kinds of like advanced tokenomics, whether that's through burns, whether that's through just like, you know, like rapid growth, and that people are there's going to be way more buyers than sellers, because if they can earn it, then they can also sell it, obviously. So you're going to kind of like, you're going to succumb to some of the same kind of tokenomics and sort of sell pressure that the rest of the crypto market's experiencing, especially if it's traded against something. If Hive goes down and the thing is built on, a Hive engine token, then that could pull the price of it down. If there's not enough liquidity, people can't get in and out with legitimate sums of money. And we see all levels of that. I see a lot of stuff that's out there where I'm like, this looks really good, or there's a lot of promise behind this. And I get really worried about the liquidity. And it's like, what's going to happen over the next 6 months to a year? Is the liquidity is it going to dry up? So I look at that a lot for like, just where stuff is trading, just the amount of liquidity that's coming in and out of it, and if it's getting delisted or if it's getting added to exchanges, because as we know, the SEC has sued like all these different exchanges, a lot of exchanges that pulled out of the U.S. market. Some have kind of ramped up their efforts on KYC, like for instance KuCoin. I got an email from KuCoin saying that they were adding KYC. So it just gets harder and harder and harder to get in and out of crypto if things kind of lock up like that. So that being said, like it's weird, because in some respects you think like, okay, like if I'm getting bored with it, or I'm getting like kind of ticked off, like, okay, where's this thing going, and why have we not advanced more, let's say on this NFT space, or kind of building out some of these ecosystems, or like some of these games that have been developed, or add-ons, why are we not seeing like more activity? That could be a huge buying opportunity to get in, but it could also be, can they make it to the end? Can they make it the next 6 months? Can they make it the next year? So, and then another thing is, let's say if you engage in these ecosystems, whether it's play to earn, or you're earning money blogging, or you're doing that kind of stuff, the amount of time and the energy that you're going to spend on that, is that going to outstrip the amount of money that you would make if you would have just dumped a bunch of money into Doge? Because at the end of the day, some of this stuff, bar a Mars-sized asteroid hitting the Earth and cracking the Earth in half, Doge is going to go up. 2 years from now, very high likelihood, the Doge is going to be worth more than it is today. Same thing with Bitcoin, same thing with Litecoin, same thing with Monero. So it's like, to me, that just sits, and I said this back in 2018, that's just kind of, that is somewhat the easy play. But obviously, like, people want to dig out the 20Xs, the 100Xs. And I'm going to mention it again. It's a little bit of a treat, because honestly, some of these, I'm going to stop mentioning them. Usually I've got to build my positions too, so keep building. But for me, I think that something like Tezos, if they can get enough money behind it, and if GameStop comes out with some banger games, on the Tezos blockchain, it could be 100x. Could be 100x. And I think the gaming, again, it's been a thing the last couple cycles, but in this last cycle, it's obviously a big thing. And I just think it is gonna notch up, or just the premise of it is gonna become that much more of a talking point again, with like in-game NFTs. I think somebody will at least get a little bit more money behind it, and it'll get a little closer. It'll get a little closer. So if we get some, if we get some good stuff built on some of these ecosystems, and it's built a little bit more, it could take that next step and everything. So that's kind of my 100x play. There's a few others that I'm looking at, but the more I look at Tezos, and the more I've used Tezos, Now, there's a lot of deficiencies in the ecosystem. Don't get me wrong, guys. A lot of deficiencies. And I worry that, you know, if it falls too far, it's out of sight, out of mind. But all it takes is, you know, some big dogs to really stack. So over the next, you know, 2-3 months, stack and stack and stack. I don't know how low it could go. Maybe it does go to 3 cents. Maybe it does go lower. You know, before we started to go up for the last cycle, it was down to a penny. And if you remember, most of the people that had under 40,000 EOS tokens, when they did the fork, they got Tezos 1-for-1. And if you remember the EOS IO, the EOS, what should I say? The EOS crowdfunding campaign, or the EOS ICO, each EOS was like $1 or whatever. So then that means like Tezos technically would have been kind of like $1, but then it fell clear to a penny. And then obviously it went over $1 and stuff like that. Now it's falling back down. So you see this stuff, this 7-8 cents kind of range. So that's what I'm stacking. And you know, you can passively earn, if you're stacking, you can earn, I think, around 14% in the resource exchange, the REX, on the native Tezos side. And then that's a 1-for-1 if you bridge it over to the EVM side. So there's a lot of capabilities, and one of the only chains, and I'll tell you, I've been deep in the weeds, guys. One of the only chains that's actually capable of this premise of the metaverse, this premise of in-game NFTs, crypto gaming, is Tezos. Now, the one that's closer actually right now, but it's just slower block times, because Tezos has half-second block times. The one that's actually closer and fully formed in Web3 and is really the closest thing that you could more quickly develop a metaverse on is actually Hive, oddly enough. The Hive ecosystem is very, very impressive, what has taken place over the years. The thing that I think is the disadvantage to Hive is if you're going to do the NFTs and you're going to do the Hive engine tokens, it's kind of on this adaptation, the Hive engine, which, you know, people can think different things about that. Is that an advantage? Is that a disadvantage? Just with Tezos, there's a lot of development behind it. There's already been a lot of development, and you know, when you see some of the stuff like that's been built out on the Hive blockchain, it's like, okay, this is cool. There's a lot of stuff done. But yeah, it's got on board more users, and I think that marketing push has always been something that's been lacking. It ends up being this kind of like close circle of people that have been in it. And if you look at like the amount, there's like 2.5 million Hive accounts. So there's a lot of accounts on it. But it would take a lot more to kind of build it out and really kind of onboard a lot of users. And it seems like some of these games that are being played, there's maybe like a couple thousand people. But Splinterlands is one of the most successful blockchain games in the whole ecosystem. And that's obviously on Hive, and it's also over on Wax and all this sort of stuff. So anyway, guys, that's a lot of rambling. The NFT market kind of makes me puking sick in some respects. I don't know why people haven't kind of went away from kind of the premise of Ethereum. How much of it is fictitious, kind of like playing hot potato back and forth with your own wallets or your friends. It's really hard saying. You know, some of the floor levels on some of the stuff has not dropped as much as I would have thought, with the neotokyo citizens, with mutant apes, these different things like that. Something to kind of look out for. And I don't know if they'll ever kind of fully develop what that's actually capable of doing, because you're going to have to wormhole or bridge it over to another blockchain that's actually capable of something. So anyway, guys, that's my thoughts. What are you guys buying? Are you guys jumping in the NFT market? Are you doing a lot of crypto gaming plays? Or are you just mainly stacking like Bitcoin, Ethereum, BNB, and that kind of thing at this point? Anyway, guys, follow me on all social media at Brian Phobos, YouTube, Instagram, Steam, Twitter, Hive, DTube, everywhere. See ya.